What would you do if you heard three tiny voices crying in the darkness during the worst blizzard of the year? That's exactly what happened to Navy SEAL veteran Axel Thompson at 2:47 a.m. on a December night that would change everything. But what he found outside his cabin door wasn't what he expected. It was something that would test every survival instinct he'd learned in combat. This is the true story of three abandoned puppies who were hours from death, a cardboard box that became their tomb, and one veteran who had to choose between sleep and salvation. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments. And if you believe that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages, hit that like button. You're going to need it for this one. Now, let's begin. The Montana wilderness was unforgiving that December night. Wind speeds reached 40 miles per hour, and the temperature had plummeted to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow piled against the windows of the remote log cabin like nature was trying to bury it alive. Inside, Axel Thompson lay in his bed, finally finding peace after another restless day. The 35-year-old Navy SEAL veteran had built this cabin specifically for solitude, far from the noise, far from the memories, far from everything that reminded him of who he used to be. The cabin sat on 50 acres of private land, with the nearest neighbor over 8 miles away. Out here, the only sounds were the wind through the pines and the occasional crack of settling timber. It was exactly how Axel wanted it. But at 2:47 a.m., something pierced through the howling storm. A cry, soft, desperate, almost human. Axel's eyes snapped open instantly, his military training kicking in. In the SEAL teams, survival often depended on distinguishing between normal sounds and threats. This wasn't normal. He lay still for 30 seconds, listening. The wind continued its assault against the cabin, but there it was again. That same cry, barely audible but unmistakably real. Axel rolled out of bed and moved to the window. Through the frost-covered glass, he could see nothing but swirling white darkness. The motion sensor lights on his porch should have detected any large movement, but they remained dark. The crying came again, and this time he was certain it wasn't human. But it wasn't wild animal either. This sound was different, younger, more vulnerable. He pulled on his boots and heavy winter coat, grabbing the tactical flashlight from his nightstand. The same flashlight that had guided him through countless night operations was now leading him towards something he couldn't yet understand. The moment Axel opened the cabin door, the Montana winter hit him like a physical blow. The wind drove snow horizontally across the porch, and the cold bit through his coat within seconds. His flashlight beam was almost useless in the storm, creating more of a white wall than illumination. But the crying was clearer now, definitely coming from somewhere near the porch steps. Axel descended carefully, each step crunching through 6 inches of fresh snow. His military training had taught him to trust his senses even when visibility was zero. The sound was close, very close. Then his flashlight beam caught something that didn't belong, a cardboard box. It sat at the bottom of his porch steps, already half buried by the storm. The top flaps moved slightly in the wind, and that's when he realized the terrible truth. The crying was coming from inside. "What the hell?" Axel muttered, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. He approached the box with the same caution he'd used when checking for IEDs in hostile territory. But when he lifted the flaps and directed his flashlight inside, nothing could have prepared him for what he saw. 3 tiny German Shepherd puppies, no more than 4 weeks old, huddled together in a pile of old towels. Their eyes were barely open, their bodies so small they could each fit in the palm of his hand. They were shivering uncontrollably, their tiny voices creating the crying sounds that had woken him. The puppies were golden and black, their fur still soft and puppy-like. But even in the darkness, Axel could see they were in bad shape. Their breathing was shallow, their movements weak. How long had they been out here? One puppy, slightly larger than the others, lifted its tiny head when the light hit them. Its eyes, barely open slits, seemed to look directly at Axel, and it let out the smallest, most desperate whimper he'd ever heard. That sound hit Axel harder than any enemy fire ever had. "Jesus," he whispered, immediately scooping up the entire box. Who would do this? As he carried them toward the cabin, his mind raced. The nearest road was over 2 miles away, accessible only by his private driveway. Someone had deliberately driven all the way out here, in this storm, just to abandon 3 helpless puppies. They'd left them to die. The warmth of the cabin hit the puppies immediately, and their crying intensified. Whether from relief or distress, Axel couldn't tell. He set the box down near the fireplace and looked down at the 3 tiny lives that had just become his responsibility. The largest puppy, the one who had looked at him, was trying to crawl toward the edge of the box. The second puppy, with more golden coloring, was pressed against the first. The third, smallest and darkest, lay still except for the rapid rise and fall of its tiny chest. Axel knelt beside the box, his hands hovering uncertainly over the puppies. He'd faced enemy combatants, survived impossible missions, led men through life and death situations. But 3 4-week-old puppies might be the most challenging thing he'd ever encountered. The largest puppy made the decision for him. It crawled directly to his hand and pressed its tiny body against his palm, seeking warmth. The trust in that simple gesture broke something loose in Axel's chest, something that had been locked away since his last deployment. "All right," he said quietly, gently lifting the puppy. "Let's see what we can do." The next few hours became the longest of Axel's life since his military service ended. He'd carried the puppies to his living room and placed them in a makeshift bed of soft towels near the fireplace. The warmth helped, but Axel could see they were in critical condition. Their tiny bodies were dehydrated, undernourished, and showing signs of hypothermia. The largest puppy, the one who had crawled to him, was the strongest of the 3. Axel found himself calling him Scout in his mind, watching as the little guy tried to take care of his siblings. Scout would position himself between the other 2 puppies and the cold air, using his small body as a shield. The middle puppy, with beautiful golden and black markings, seemed more alert now that he was warm. This one had bright, curious eyes that followed Axel's every movement. Axel started thinking of him as Ranger because of the way he observed everything with tactical awareness. But it was the smallest puppy that worried Axel the most, the tiny female, who he'd begun calling Angel because of her almost white golden fur, was barely responsive. Her breathing was shallow and irregular, and she hadn't made a sound since he'd brought them inside. Axel had basic first aid training from his military days, but puppies this young required specialized care. He tried to give them small amounts of warm water with an eyedropper he found in his kitchen, but Angel wouldn't take any. By 5 a.m., as the storm continued to rage outside, Axel made a decision that would have been impossible 6 hours earlier. He was going to fight for these lives with everything he had. "Come on, Angel," he whispered, gently stroking the tiny puppy's fur with one finger. "Don't give up on me now." Scout seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. The little male positioned himself right next to Angel, pressing his warm body against hers. Ranger joined them, and Axel watched in amazement as the 2 stronger puppies created a living blanket around their sister. The sight reminded Axel of something from his SEAL training: no one gets left behind. These puppies were applying the same principle without any training at all. It was pure instinct, pure loyalty. At 7 a.m., when the storm finally began to weaken, Axel wrapped all 3 puppies in a heated blanket and made the treacherous drive to Kalispell, where the nearest emergency veterinary clinic was located. The 45-minute drive took him nearly 2 hours through snow-covered mountain roads, but he didn't stop once. Dr. Sarah Martinez had been working at the Kalispell Animal Emergency Clinic for 15 years, but she'd never seen anyone arrive at 9 a.m. looking like they'd been through a war zone, carrying 3 tiny puppies like they were made of glass. "What happened?" she asked immediately, leading Axel to an examination room. "Found them outside my cabin during the storm," Axel explained, his voice hoarse from worry. "They've been out there for hours, maybe longer. This little one," he gestured to Angel, "she's not doing well." Dr. Martinez began her examination immediately. Scout and Ranger submitted to the checkup with remarkable calm, as if they understood this human was trying to help, but Angel remained limp in the doctor's hands. "They're about 4 weeks old," Dr. Martinez said after several minutes. "Severely dehydrated and undernourished. The 2 males are in rough shape, but they should recover with proper care and feeding." She paused, examining Angel more carefully. "The female, I'm not going to lie to you, She's in critical condition. Her body temperature is dangerously low and she's showing signs of severe hypothermia. The next 24 hours will tell us everything." Axel felt something twist in his chest. "What can we do?" "I need to keep her here for intensive care. IV fluids, controlled warming, constant monitoring." Even then, Dr. Martinez trailed off. "I've seen puppies this young go either way. She's a fighter, but she's so small." "What about the other two?" Axel asked. "You can take them home if you're willing to care for them. They'll need feeding every 2 hours with puppy formula, warmth, and constant attention. Do you have experience with puppies this young?" Axel almost laughed. 3 days ago, his biggest concern had been whether to chop firewood before or after his morning coffee. Now, he was being asked to become a round-the-clock puppy caregiver. "No," he admitted, "but I'm willing to learn." Dr. Martinez studied him for a moment. Something in his eyes, the same determination that had carried him through SEAL training, convinced her. "All right, I'll give you everything you need and show you exactly what to do." As she prepared the supplies, Scout did something that made everyone in the room stop. The small puppy, who had been resting quietly in the carrier, began to whimper, not in distress, but in what could only be described as worry. He was looking directly at Angel on the examination table. "He knows," Dr. Martinez said softly. "They always know." Ranger joined Scout at the edge of the carrier, both puppies focused entirely on their sister. The bond between them was visible, undeniable, and heartbreaking. "Doctor," Axel said quietly, "whatever it costs to save her, I'll pay it. These three, they belong together." Dr. Martinez nodded. "I'll do everything I can, but Mr. Thompson, Axel Thompson. Mr. Thompson, you need to prepare yourself. Even if she survives the next 24 hours, she may have lasting effects from this exposure. Are you prepared for that possibility?" Axel looked down at Scout and Ranger, who were still focused on Angel. 3 abandoned puppies who had already shown more loyalty to each other than most humans showed in a lifetime. "Doctor, I spent 8 years in the Navy SEALs. We have a saying, leave no one behind. That applies to these 3 now." Dr. Martinez smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. "Then I'd say Angel has chosen the right person to fight for her." As Axel prepared to leave with Scout and Ranger, he made a promise to the tiny female puppy lying unconscious on the examination table. "Hold on, Angel, your brothers need you. And apparently, so do I." The drive home was quiet, except for the soft breathing of the 2 puppies sleeping in their carrier. But for the first time in months, Axel wasn't driving toward solitude. He was driving toward something else entirely: responsibility, purpose, and the beginning of a bond that would change everything. Outside, the Montana wilderness stretched endlessly in every direction, but inside his truck, Axel Thompson was no longer alone. The next 72 hours transformed Axel's cabin from a place of solitude into a makeshift puppy intensive care unit. Every 2 hours, day and night, Axel would wake to feed Scout and Ranger. The 2 puppies had adapted to their new environment with remarkable resilience, but their behavior told a different story. They refused to eat unless they were positioned where they could see Axel's phone, the phone that would ring with updates about Angel. Dr. Martinez called every 6 hours with reports. Day 1, she's stable but still critical. Day 2, she's responding to treatment, showing signs of improvement. Day 3, she's going to make it, Mr. Thompson. It's a miracle. When Axel arrived at the clinic on day 4 to bring Angel home, he found Dr. Martinez in the recovery area with tears in her eyes. "She's been calling for them," she said, gesturing to the tiny puppy who was finally alert and vocal. "Listen." Angel was making soft melodic whimpers, not distressed cries, but what sounded almost like she was singing. It was a sound unlike anything Axel had heard from the other puppies. "She's been doing this since yesterday morning," Dr. Martinez explained. "It's like she's trying to communicate with Scout and Ranger from here." The reunion at Axel's cabin was something he would remember for the rest of his life. The moment he set Angel's carrier down, Scout and Ranger went absolutely silent. Then, as if responding to some invisible signal, all 3 puppies began making the same melodic sound Angel had been making at the clinic. "Well, I'll be damned," Axel whispered. "They have their own language." Over the following weeks, as the puppies grew stronger and more mobile, Axel began to understand the depth of their bond. They moved as a unit, ate as a unit, and slept in a perfect triangle formation with Angel always in the center, protected by her brothers. But it was their behavior during Axel's nightmares that truly amazed him. The first time it happened, Axel woke from a particularly vivid combat flashback to find all 3 puppies on his bed. Scout was positioned by his feet, Ranger by his left side, and Angel was pressed against his chest, her tiny paw resting over his heart. The nightmare faded instantly. "How did you 3 get up here?" he asked, looking at the bed that should have been too high for them to climb. But there they were, somehow having worked together to reach him when he needed them most. As the puppies reached 8 weeks old, their personalities became distinct. Scout was the natural leader, always the first to investigate new situations and the one who made decisions for the group. Ranger was the strategist, carefully observing everything before acting. Angel was the heart, smaller than her brothers, but the one who seemed to sense emotions and respond to them. It was during one of their evening training sessions that Axel first realized what he was witnessing. He'd been teaching them basic commands, sit, stay, come, when he noticed something extraordinary. When Scout learned a command, he would immediately turn and demonstrate it for Ranger and Angel. They would practice together until all 3 had mastered it perfectly. "They're training as a team," Axel murmured, watching the 3 puppies work in perfect coordination. "They're not just siblings, they're a unit." The breakthrough came during a winter hiking trip when the puppies were 12 weeks old. Axel had taken them to a section of his property where he'd set up basic obstacle courses for their exercise. It was meant to be play, but what happened next was pure instinct. Angel had wandered slightly off the trail and gotten trapped in a small ravine, not dangerous, but too deep for her to climb out alone. Instead of panicking or barking for Axel, she made that soft, melodic sound. Within seconds, Scout and Ranger had positioned themselves on either side of the ravine. Axel watched in amazement as Scout descended into the ravine while Ranger remained at the top. Scout guided Angel to a specific spot, then Ranger lowered a stick he'd found. Scout helped Angel grab the stick, and Ranger pulled her up while Scout pushed from below. The entire rescue took less than 2 minutes and was executed with the precision of a military operation. "Son of a gun," Axel breathed. "You 3 just conducted your first search and rescue." That night, as Axel researched search and rescue training for dogs, he found information about something called pack rescue operations. Multiple dogs working together in coordinated efforts. But every article mentioned that such coordination took years of intensive training to develop. Scout, Ranger, and Angel had developed it naturally. Over the following months, Axel began incorporating more advanced training into their routine, not because he planned to use them professionally, but because he could see they thrived on challenges that required teamwork. The 3 puppies, now growing into strong, intelligent dogs, began to demonstrate capabilities that amazed everyone who met them. They could coordinate searches of large areas, with Scout taking point, Ranger covering the perimeter, and Angel using her incredible sensing abilities to detect what others missed. Local park rangers started asking Axel if his 3-dog team might help with missing hikers. Wildlife officers wanted to know if they could assist with search operations. Word spread through Montana's outdoor community about the veteran with the remarkable Miracle Trio. But it was Dr. Martinez who suggested the name that would stick. "They're not just a team," she told Axel during one of their regular checkups. "They're a brotherhood, the Midnight Brotherhood." The name fit perfectly. 3 abandoned puppies who had found each other in their darkest moment, bonded by survival, and trained by instinct to work as one. By their first birthday, Scout, Ranger, and Angel had assisted in 7 successful search and rescue operations across northwestern Montana. Their reputation was growing, but more importantly, they had given Axel something he thought he'd lost forever: purpose. The isolated cabin was still home, but it was no longer a place of solitude. It had become headquarters for something much more important, a family that had chosen each other and a mission that saved lives. As Axel watched the 3 dogs sleeping in their triangle formation near the fireplace, he marveled at how one midnight cry in a blizzard had changed everything. Three tiny voices in the darkness had led to something extraordinary, but their biggest test was still coming. And when it arrived, the Midnight Brotherhood would prove that some bonds are strong enough to save lives, including their own. The Midnight Cry. Part 4. Part 4. The Ultimate Test. 18 months after that midnight rescue, the call that would define the Midnight Brotherhood came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. Sheriff David Chen's voice was tight with urgency. "Axel, we need your team." 8-year-old Marcus Williams disappeared from his family's camping site in Glacier National Park 6 hours ago. Weather's turning bad fast and we're running out of time. Axel was already reaching for his gear. "What's the situation?" Family was camping near Lake McDonald. Kid wandered off around 9 p.m. while his parents were setting up camp. Temperatures dropping to 10 degrees tonight, and there's a storm front moving in. We've got 40 searchers out there, but the area's massive and the terrain's brutal. Scout, Ranger, and Angel were already at the door, their search harnesses in their mouths. After 18 months of operations, they knew the sound of an emergency call. "We'll be there in 45 minutes, Axel said. The drive to Glacier National Park took them through increasingly treacherous weather. Snow had begun falling, and visibility was dropping rapidly. But inside the truck, the Midnight Brotherhood was focused and calm, each dog positioned to maintain visual contact with the others. At the search command post, Axel met Marcus Williams's parents, Sarah and David, whose faces showed the particular terror that only comes with a missing child. Sarah clutched a small red jacket that belonged to Marcus. "He's never wandered off before," she said through tears. "He knows better. Something must have scared him or confused him." Sheriff Chen briefed Axel on the search parameters. "We've covered a 2-mile radius from the campsite. Nothing. The area beyond that gets into some serious wilderness, ravines, dense forest, areas where a child could get completely lost." Axel knelt down, with Scout, Ranger, and Angel, letting them smell Marcus's jacket. Their response was immediate and synchronized. Scout's ears perked up in alert mode. Ranger began scanning the perimeter with tactical precision. Angel pressed her nose deeply into the fabric, her extraordinary sensing abilities taking in every detail. Then, Angel did something that made everyone stop. She looked directly at Axel and made that same melodic sound she'd made as a tiny puppy, but this time it carried urgency and purpose. "She's got something," Axel said. "Which direction, Angel?" Angel turned toward the darkest, most challenging section of the wilderness, an area the human search teams had deemed too dangerous for a child to have reached. "Are you sure?" Sheriff Chen asked. "That's rough terrain. A kid wouldn't go that way." "Unless he was running from something," Axel replied, "or following something. Angel's never been wrong." The search that followed tested every skill the Midnight Brotherhood had developed. Scout took point, navigating through dense undergrowth and rocky terrain with the confidence of his military namesake. Ranger flanked wide, ensuring they didn't miss any possible routes. Angel maintained focus on Marcus's scent trail, even as falling snow threatened to erase all traces. 2 hours into the search, they were nearly 3 miles from the original campsite when Angel suddenly stopped and made an intense, whining sound. Scout and Ranger immediately converged on her position. "What is it, girl?" Axel asked, following their gaze. Through the snow and darkness, he could barely make out a shape about 50 yards ahead. It looked like a small cave opening, or an overhang in the rocks. As they approached, Axel heard it, the faintest sound of crying. "Marcus!" he called out. "Marcus, can you hear me?" The crying stopped immediately, replaced by a small, frightened voice. "I'm here. I'm stuck." Marcus Williams was wedged into a narrow cave opening, trying to escape the cold but unable to get back out. He was hypothermic, scared, and had been crying for hours, but he was alive. "Hey there, buddy," Axel said gently, shining his flashlight into the cave. "I'm Axel, and these are my partners Scout, Ranger, and Angel. We're here to take you home." What happened next became legend in search and rescue circles throughout Montana. While Axel worked to safely extract Marcus from the cave, the 3 dogs positioned themselves in a perfect protective perimeter. Scout faced outward, watching for any potential threats. Ranger moved to the cave entrance, his body providing a windbreak. Angel squeezed into the cave opening alongside Marcus, pressing her warm body against the frightened child. "The doggie's keeping me warm," Marcus whispered as Axel carefully freed him from the rocks. During the careful extraction, Angel never left Marcus's side. She seemed to understand that this small human needed exactly what she and her brothers had needed that midnight so long ago: warmth, protection, and the promise that he wasn't alone. The hike back to the command post took nearly 2 hours through worsening weather. Marcus, wrapped in emergency blankets and warming packs, rode on Axel's back while the Midnight Brotherhood maintained their protective formation around them. Scout led the way, somehow finding the safest path through terrain that had become treacherous with ice and snow. Ranger swept the flanks, ensuring they stayed on course. Angel walked directly beneath Axel, positioned so that Marcus could reach down and touch her fur whenever he needed reassurance. When they emerged from the wilderness at 6:43 a.m., the scene at the command post erupted in cheers and tears. Sarah Williams collapsed to her knees as Axel handed her son to her, while David Williams stood speechless, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to Axel. Then she looked down at Scout, Ranger, and Angel. "Thank you, all of you." Marcus, despite his exhaustion and hypothermia, had one request. "Can I see the dogs again? They saved me." As Marcus sat wrapped in blankets, he reached out to pet each of the 3 dogs. Scout sat at attention, accepting the boy's gratitude with dignity. Ranger positioned himself protectively beside the family. Angel laid her head on Marcus's lap and made her soft melodic sound, the same sound that had called Axel to their rescue 18 months earlier. "They're singing," Marcus said with wonder. "The dogs are singing." Sheriff Chen approached Axel as the family was loaded into ambulances for medical evaluation. "That was extraordinary, Axel. I've never seen anything like what those 3 dogs did tonight." "They're special," Axel agreed, watching as Scout, Ranger, and Angel formed their familiar triangle formation. "But tonight they proved something I've always suspected." "What's that?" "Some families are formed in the darkness, and those bonds can light the way for others." As the sun rose over Glacier National Park, the Midnight Brotherhood settled into their truck for the drive home. They had completed their 15th successful search and rescue operation, but more importantly, they had fulfilled the promise that had formed between them on that midnight so long ago, that no one would be left alone in the cold. 3 abandoned puppies who had cried in the darkness until someone answered had become the answer to other cries in the darkness. In the months that followed, requests for the Midnight Brotherhood came from across the Pacific Northwest. But regardless of how far their reputation spread, they would always return to that Montana cabin where their story began. Because some rescues save more than just lives, they save souls. And sometimes, the smallest voices in the darkest moments create bonds strong enough to light the way for everyone. The midnight cry that had changed everything had become a midnight promise. Wherever someone was lost, scared, and alone, 3 voices would answer as one. After all, Brotherhood means no one gets left behind, not in combat, not in the wilderness, and not in the cold. The Midnight Brotherhood had made that promise in the darkness, and they had kept it in the light. Welcome to the pack, 3 voices in the night, 3 hearts beat as one, 3 heroes who prove that sometimes the most powerful rescues begin with being rescued yourself.